Hello. I wanted to talk a little bit about internal controls today. Go ahead and share the screen. We'll get started with the presentation. Okay, so internal controls. Um, Internal controls are a very useful thing. I know they're talked about in a lot of accounting classes, some of the basic accounting classes, some of the upper level accounting classes, and even graduate classes. So anyone in business should be familiar with internal controls and their role within a company. So, start off with one of the main events related to internal controls was the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, otherwise known as SOX. This basically rule was after kind of followed Enron and the WorldCom debacles of 2000, 2001 era. And basically what the Sarbanes-Oxley did was it required all publicly traded companies to establish a system of internal control, and that system of internal controls would be audited annually. So it expanded it, so expanded internal controls greatly and their importance within an organization. Now, some elements of internal controls. And internal controls are kind of, if you want to think of a definition of them, think of them as a way that a company protects their assets. They protect the things of value within their company, their information, their physical assets. What protections does a company set inside to protect themselves, to protect what they own or have a value? So, many ways to do this. I'm going to discuss a few of them here. One would be safeguarding assets. This would be putting in physical controls, such as limiting access to certain areas. Like think about it, a company should not allow just anyone to go into certain areas of their company. They should have card access to enter those areas. Accounting department, a lot of times, is one where if you are going to enter accounting, you've got to have a card. You've got to have your ID in order to be able to enter that area. Information technology would be another area. I mean, a company just doesn't want someone to be able to walk into the room where their servers is, where their servers are located. Protect certain like inventory. A lot of I've known companies before, and I worked for one with that did vending, and we basically had all the inventory, those crates of Snickers and Cokes and all that. It was in a locked area, and only people that could pull orders for the drivers had access to that area. And we figured that by not allowing everyone in that area, we probably saved 5 to 10% losses related to theft due to our inventory. People just walking through and taking a Snicker or taking a case of Cokes. We prevented that by limiting access to that area. So one physical control is just limit access to an area. um, it's a very easy control. Unless you have access to be there or a reason to be there, you cannot enter there. This was also a case at a company where I worked at that had a cash room. And not everyone could enter the cash room. Only people that worked in there could enter the cash room, or the vault. I've known banks that have their vault that way, that only people with access can enter the vault, which makes sense. It really does make sense when you think about it. So physical controls, safeguarding assets are a great way for a company to protect their things of value. Another one would be separation of duties. And separation of duties is just certain jobs should be separated out. One employee should not have access or the ability to do certain things. Sometimes those duties should be separated out between two employees. So, for example, a big separation of duties is no one should have the ability to update the system and have control over that asset. So, like someone who has control over inventory should not be able to update the accounting system related to inventory. This is another reason that accounting departments never have cash, because accounting departments have the ability to update the system. So they should never have cash at their disposal. Um, and so there are just a lot of jobs, if you look around the company, that two people should be doing them instead of one. When you don't have good separation of duties, you a lot of times have employees that have far greater access than they should. They have far greater responsibilities than one employee should have. And that's kind of a recipe for disaster, because A lot of times in those cases, they can take something and they can cover it up because they have access not only to the asset, but to the system itself. Independent verification is another way. Independent verification is, a management overseeing a certain process and checking, doing regular or random checks to see how that is going. Like for example, like a head teller doing surprise cash counts in teller drawers. Or when I worked in internal audit one time, we would show up twice a year and count every single branch. It was just a great way to verify the numbers at that branch. We would show up surprise. We would show up unannounced. We would go in. We would count. We would get there first thing in the morning. We would walk in with the branch manager, and we would count the branch, count every bit of cash there, and make sure that it matches to what the system is saying the cash that should be there. So surprise counts, independent verification by managers, by internal audit is another great control to put in. And the thing is, let individuals know that, yeah, this is going to be surprise counted on occasion. Again, it's a good control to have in place. Information technology controls, such as, IT controls, such as, um, having, training employees on what emails not to open, having, changing passwords often, updating passwords whenever an employee leaves, making sure that employees are taken out of the system whenever they leave the company, or if a company transfers, making sure that what they have access to is updated when they transfer to a different part of the company, that they don't still have access to their old part of the company. Things of that nature are very good controls that you can have as far as IT. And a lot of it does come down to employee training. Like I said, a big thing is fit hacking. And so making sure that your employees know, okay, what can I look for in emails to see if it could be a phishing, something related to phishing? Making sure that the company has proper antivirus software and that it's regularly updated. All kinds of things like this are just ways that a company can institute controls, again, to protect themselves, to protect their assets. Now, a couple of ways that controls can be that that employees can work their way around controls. One would be collusion. And collusion, a lot of controls are set up to stop one employee. So if two employees start working together in certain positions, they could work around the control. Like I talked about earlier, I said that a lot of times controls are set in place, like separation of duties, to make sure that one employee basically has control of the asset and another one has the ability to update the system. But if those two employees start working together, a lot of times they can manipulate the system and work around the control. So collusion could be a way um, that employees could work around controls. Another one would be management override, where management just says, we're put this transaction through, we're not going to follow the controls. And occasionally that does happen, but that is another way that controls can be worked around. Overall, controls can be very effective. In most companies, they are. They're regularly examined, they're regularly updated as needed. And again, a lot of times a good internal audit department is a great way to ensure that controls are effective and working.